Radio Free Skaro.
Hello, everyone. Welcome to Radio Free Skaro, episode number 739. I'm Stephen in Edmonton.
Warren in Vancouver.
And Chris in Edmonton.
Hope you're doing well, everyone. Hope you're staying inside, staying in safe when you can. I only go out for... It only started getting nice in Edmonton, like, literally yesterday. So the temptation to even go outside and go for walks has been low. I've only been going out for groceries. And even that's a hellish experience because, like, because some grocery stores have, like, they have, like, one-way aisles and stuff, and, like, they limit the number of people in there. I've sort of found a nice time to go grocery shopping where you don't have to line up outside and stuff. But the panicky time when I get, and this actually extends to pretty much anything, not just the coronavirus epidemic, but when I have to stand still and I'm waiting in line and there are people coming towards me, and it's like I get like galley flashbacks all the time. Like, I'm just standing in the Starbucks line. I just want a coffee right now. I don't have the oomph to talk to anyone. Stay away from me. I just want coffee. And now I have that sort of that feeling of fright when people are coming near me in a grocery store and I can't move out of the way. So
And the loss of control. Or lack of control over such things is a daunting aspect.
It is.
And there's always that one person who just stands in the middle of the aisle staring at whatever it is. And you're like, get the hell out of the way.
I've limited my outside excursions. I've gone out once in the last, I think, 5 weeks to pick up.
Wow. I go out every day because we have a dog to take care of.
To pick up prescriptions or and some other stuff. And for the I don't know, half an hour, 45 minutes I was gone, I came back with so much ranting and venting about how idiotic people were out there that it makes me not want to.
The thing is, they never weren't. It just wasn't deadly before.
Yeah.
Yeah. There wasn't the fright factor.
No, you're just self-conscious about it now. I'm just self-conscious about everything now. Like all the things I sort of took for granted. Like, like I walked into the grocery store and there's like a bunch of people in the produce section. I go, this is too many people. I don't like this. I want produce. This is the main reason why I go out like once a week to get like fresh vegetables and fruit and stuff, because I'll get the scurvy and die if I don't. So I sort of like I had to do like an end run around, and I sort of left a cart and just sort of like went in like secret ops style and just grabbed my bunch of bananas and ran back to my cart and tried to minimize it as much. But anyway, I hope everyone else there is safe. Today on the podcast, last week we had an interview with Paul Wilmshurst, who he himself, of course, his whole industry is shut down right now with making television and movies and stuff. We interviewed him last week. We talk about his stories this week. It's actually what he said in the interview, because I asked him about the COVID-19 stuff at the very beginning, and like I queried like how much, like Doctor Who was supposed to resume production in September. September's a long way off. Who knows what will have happened by then? But I asked him like how long do you think it would take for a TV production to sort of like get back up and running and be on schedule? And like he was like, oh, it'll be a week. Like everyone seems to like be able to sort of like just pick up and go.
Well, I guess the advantage of doing nothing is that it's potentially easy to pick up and do whatever.
Yeah, I mean, the scripts are being written. One apparently by Ed Heim, as it said briefly on his agent's page before it was taken down. Once people cottoned on that, people read our agent's page about stuff that's coming up, and when it's Doctor Who, it's like news.
That's just a perpetual realization, actually.
Yeah, not the first time it's happened. So, like scripts, I assume are being written and everything, and so once everything is finally safe to be able to enter into production, it'll probably happen pretty quickly.
Especially the way that writing is done under Chibnall with the writers' room style thing. I mean, Zoom meetings, etc., are becoming a norm, and it's not that hard to hold a virtual writers' room meeting to discuss, hey, where are you at in your script, or what ideas do we want to develop today, or whatever.
I was reading the thing that's more generally about Hollywood than anything else, but they were talking about, writers are the one thing. And the other thing is all the agents are doing business deals now, because what else have they got to do? So all that stuff is still happening. And I was reading another thing that said, once the all clear happens, you're going to see an insane rush for studio space. So here in Vancouver, for one, I'm sure it'll be gangbusters for like a couple months, and people will have to move to other places to shoot stuff just because they won't have any alternative, because everything at once they'll be trying to make it. Yeah, they could do it in a week, but so can everybody else. So we'll see.
Yeah, it'll be. I wonder if like there'll be a lot of like studios around the world, not just your usual haunts down the street or where you usually enter into production. I mean, maybe it's a good thing that Doctor Who is sort of like in the past couple of years gone to South Africa for their first or second blocks.
They were already building studios here because of the, at the time, current level of production, and that's going to happen again at some point, I'm sure.
Mm-hmm. We shall see. It's a long way off. Before we get to the rest of the news and indeed the Miniscope, though, about a month ago, Graham Burke and Robert Smith were on the show to talk about their book, Who is the Doctor 2? And just, before we started recording, like this is, oh my God, what was it, like March 13th, I think it was the day, or March the 12th, I believe, was the day. Think back to March 12th and where we were as a society back then. And just as things are really starting to take off here in North America, and Robert and I were talking because he's a professor at the University of Ottawa. And like I was asking, like, maybe we should talk about where we are going, what's going on with the pandemic and stuff like that. And he sort of says, maybe we don't want to talk about that quite yet, because it was very fresh and new and perhaps difficult to listen to. But now I feel like the coronavirus and COVID-19 and pandemics are all part of our regular day-to-day life. So it was time to bring Robert back on. Robert Smith from the University of Ottawa. Hello.
Hello. Thanks for having me.
Absolutely. So like I know you through Doctor Who circles and like Outside In, and of course the book that you've written for the Black Archive about Doctor Who and the Silurians, which came out in January of this year, and there's a whole chapter about it on pandemics and plague and stuff. How depressingly timely that is. But your day job is of course much more important. So tell me and the listeners what your actual line of work is.
Yes, unsurprisingly, I do other things than watch Doctor Who all day. I mean, much as I would love to. No, my day job is I'm a professor of disease modeling. So I'm in both the Department of Mathematics and also the Faculty of Medicine at the University of Ottawa, and I study diseases. I've been studying, global pandemics for the last 20 years. I've looked at both existing pandemics and hypothetical pandemics, and, this is a fun little thing, and everyone goes, oh yeah, okay, how interesting, that'll never apply to my life, and suddenly here we are.
And here we are, like CBC News is calling on you to do hits and stuff from your office. So like our world's intercepted. Well, my world with you intercepted anyway one afternoon when I saw you on CBC News talking about this. When you were on the show last, like in March, I think it was March the 12th, we recorded that, and things were just sort of starting to kick off a little bit. And I thought, oh, this will be interesting. Let's talk about it. And we were kind of hesitant, just because I don't think the world was ready for such a thing. Well, this is the world now. So how? It'd be a dumb way of saying how has this pandemic been for you? But how has the spread and the progression of this pandemic sort of panned out in the way that you perhaps saw it early on?
Yeah, I mean it's very surreal watching something you've studied for 20 years unfold in real time. It's going exactly the way that you every standard disease goes. It's just on a larger scale. It's funny because on March 12th, what I was doing was I was commissioned by the university to run a very quick study on should we close campus or not. Well, they were sort of like, should we reduce contacts? What should we do? We don't have any good models. And I took a break from that day of modeling to do the interview with you guys. And I thought, oh, phew, it's like I get to not talk about disease stuff for a little while, then go back to it. And then as a result of this modeling, the very next day they closed campus, and that's where, everything kind of went off the cliff. And it's fascinating to me because, I mean, in many ways, this is what you should be doing in every disease, but of course we don't. And most of the time we say, well, it's, there's acceptable losses, like we do with everything, with driving a car and, kind of just, existing, and hospitals and everything. But I think one of the key things is that this is something that we can control. Most of the things in life, the big problems we have, like climate change and so on, they're just too big, and it feels like there's nothing we can do. There's something we can do here. We can stay home. And so I think that appeals to people a lot, because it's like, right, for once, we can deal with a giant problem. It's not necessarily the greatest thing that we've ever done, but it's a manageable solution for the most part. And this is really a disease of the healthcare system. It's as diseases go, it's pretty mild, right? I mean, it sounds scary, but it's not actually that scary. I mean, I've lived in Africa, where I was in an Ebola-infested country. We had an Ebola outbreak, and people panicked a lot less than they're panicking in the Western world with COVID-19, which, let's be honest, is a lot easier to handle than Ebola is. It's not that it's a picnic, but it's in the scheme of things, it's not the worst thing. I mean, in some ways, I think it's the perfect disease because it doesn't kill most people, right? The reason Ebola doesn't spread so fast is because it just basically wipes people out, and you don't get a chance to spread it to the next person. Whereas COVID-19 basically has a very small death rate, and that's excellent. That's also terrible because it allows it to spread very far. So if it's going to kill 2% of anyone it infects, that effectively means it's going to kill 2% of the world. And suddenly that's not a small number anymore. That's a very large number. Right. And so the one thing we can do is if your lungs basically are non-functional because of this disease, right, because it's an upper respiratory disease, so basically means you have trouble breathing, what you can do is you can get a machine to breathe for you, and that's the ventilator. And so effectively the machine breathes for you while your lungs repair themselves. So that's why we need the hospitals. That's why we need the ventilators. And it basically becomes a resource problem because we don't have enough of those things for 2% of the world to descend upon the hospital system at once. And so that means we have to kind of spread it out. And that's why we're flattening the curve. And the aim is to, basically not avoid it, it's to slow it down, right? We're probably all going to catch it at some point. It's just we want to spread out those catchings over time. And that way also the most serious cases, I'd say the ones who are, would otherwise die if they didn't have the ventilator, we can save those people, but we have to save them not all in the same week because we don't have enough ventilators for that.
How do you... has the planking the curve and flattening the curve efforts around the world, and perhaps specifically in the U.S. and Canada, I suppose, which are different cases, do you think they've worked? I've been watching the daily updates from the various provinces and the country, and like BC seems to have made some progress and stuff, and Alberta to a lesser extent, perhaps. But how do you see it as going?
Actually, I see it working remarkably well. We're coming out of this, like we're starting to come out of this, and we're coming out of it faster than I imagined. I thought this would take longer than it's taking. I think, for example, Australia is hitting the recovery point now. That is quite shocking to me because they were not particularly good at shutting things down. Like they did shut some things down, but they were slow to close schools, for instance. What's interesting is very heterogeneous, right? So as you say, different provinces in Canada are having very different outcomes. Quebec is not doing great, whereas BC initially did very badly, and then they acted pretty quickly, and that seemed to work. And what we've seen is that areas of the world that have acted fast and kind of shut things down, those ones are getting through the pandemic pretty well, pretty quickly, and the ones that didn't are suffering. So, for example, Sweden decided, we're not going to worry about this. We're going to have voluntary stay at homes, but otherwise we're not shutting down our economy. And Sweden is now the 7th worst hit country as far as deaths are concerned, per capita. This has not gone well. South Dakota had a similar thing. They said, no, we're going to just keep everything open. And then they had an outbreak in a meat packing plant that was so bad they shut the plant indefinitely, not just for the purposes of the disease. I think 300 workers got infected and stuff. So it's sort of, it's sad, but it also shows why we're doing this, because it actually does work. And what we're seeing is that the countries that and provinces that do act quickly, they're able to pass through this much faster.
Mm-hmm. Tying this into Doctor Who, because we have to every 10 minutes on this podcast out of our contract. But there's a whole chapter in your book about Doctor Who and the Silurians on the Black Archive series from Obverse Books that talks about pandemics, because of course there is a plague that the Silurians unleash upon humanity in that book, in that story rather. So was that story sort of a natural for you, given your background in studying pandemics?
Yes, it absolutely was. I mean, the Black Archive, it was such a wacky idea when I first heard about it, that they basically write a whole book about one Doctor Who story. I thought, really? Can you really do that? And then you think about it, you're like, yeah, okay, we can do that. And so I pitched for the Silurians solely because of the disease. And I sort of thought, I love that story for lots of reasons. And so, I write about lots of stuff. I write about sort of science as a concept. I write about kind of like ethics of science. I also write about like, length of Doctor Who story, because it's infamously long story. What's the role of UNIT and so on. But the real hook for me was the pandemic. And I was like, oh, this is such a beautiful on-screen illustration of two things, which is, one is that there's an actual plague and people are dying on screen. It's not a Doctor Who sort of, hypothetical, oh yes, there's 1,000 people dying out there, but we're only going to see 3 of them. It's like you actually see, Terran sticks collapsing in the subway station and stuff. And so, this to me was such a powerful image when I was young too, long before I was interested in diseases. And just, it's very haunting just watching ordinary people die of a thing that they have no control over, because they happen to, be in a train station with somebody infected, which, you have nothing you can do about that, really. It's just pure luck. So that's of course, very resonant with what's happening these days. And I found that very powerful. The other very strong thing that Dr. Silurians does is it shows actual science being done on screen. So the Doctor is not just like, waving a sonic screwdriver around and then fixing things within 30 seconds. He has to do actual experiments, and he's trying like all the drugs at once and then all the combinations and seeing what happens. And he has to write down the formula and then gets it wrong and then has an accident and then really has a eureka moment. Like all that stuff is a good illustration of how science actually works. And yet TV is very bad at showing science, for the large reason that it's boring. Right? I mean, science is really dull, and it's a lot of failure until you have a success. And that's, that doesn't make for good television. And, as a scientist, I don't even want to watch that.
All right.
So fair enough. But,
It's a montage of like basically fading between like, John Pertwee looking at test tubes and the Brigadier answering phones, and like, we don't actually find out how long of a time passes for this, the disease isn't cured in the better part of an afternoon is basically what they're trying to say, I think.
Yeah, I think the only trick they missed was like the Brigadier working at home and like only wearing shorts beneath his uniform or something.
Right. So, that doesn't happen. In that chapter rather in the book, you do make a point where we're really bad at eradicating actual diseases. Smallpox being the big one. There is a eureka moment at the end of where the Doctor finds the cure, everyone gets treated, everything goes back to normal. But a lot of people nowadays with COVID-19 are basically saying, well, we just got to wait for the vaccine. But when I think about it and compare my minuscule knowledge that I've like gleaned from like watching documentaries and listening to podcasts in the last month, so bear with me on this, but is that like the immediate comparison that we're all drawing is the 1918 flu, the Spanish flu. Yes. But one thinks that they never had like a vaccine. There was no great like polio vaccine moment where everybody lined up and got vaccinated and that was it. We solved it and everything. So how do you see us coming out of COVID-19? Are we all just waiting for a vaccine, or are we just sort of waiting for ways for us to cope with this disease and then sort of to get on with regular life again?
Yeah, it's an excellent question, because I think there's some sense that science will just solve all our problems eventually, right? And so people kind of like have simultaneously a lot of faith in science and also deep suspicion of science, but I think rooted in there is the idea that science is extremely powerful. And I think even the people who are kind of anti-science are scared of it because they think it's really powerful. And actually science is a very slow, very like incompetent kind of way of doing stuff. It just happens to be better than anything else we've ever invented. And so, the idea that like, oh, we'll just come up with a vaccine. Well, we have vaccines for about 2% of all diseases. And so we're not very good at coming up with vaccines. And the idea that we will just magically, like create a vaccine out of nowhere, these things take a long time, a lot of testing, a lot of trial and error. Now, some resources, of course, will go into this that won't necessarily go into other diseases, because there's obviously a huge interest in this. So if it's an issue of just, money or, subjects to experiment on, that's probably going to be solved. I have reason to believe that COVID-19 will we will have a vaccine for it, because it has some properties that make it more similar to diseases that we have vaccines for, like the measles, rather than diseases that we have failed to develop vaccines against, like HIV. So virologically, I think it's actually susceptible to a vaccine. But in that sense, if we get it, we'll be lucky, because not every disease is like that. And we could have easily had one that is much more difficult. And even then, most vaccines, they're only targeting one strain of the disease. So you generally target the wild type. So that's the most fit strain of the disease. But you can then have evolutionary pressure from the vaccine itself. And so that means that the virus has a strong incentive to mutate. So if it does create a mutant, then if that mutant is resistant to the vaccine, that mutant gets selected for and then it gets passed on. And so it's quite easy to imagine that you have a vaccine and you stop the disease, and then it sort of pops up again in a maybe less fit strain. It may be less efficient at spreading, and so on. And it's like playing whack-a-mole, right? You keep kind of hitting this thing with as many kind of different vaccine strains as you can, and you hope that you either whack it out completely, or you manage to do it enough that it works. Like the flu shot, we have the flu shot every year because the flu mutates, and what we do is we actually use mathematical models to try and anticipate what strain of the flu we'll have in 2 years' time, and develop a vaccine now so that when it comes along in 2 years we can vaccinate. And we don't always get it right because sometimes there's unexpected mutations. So some years you have a bad flu, and that's because we didn't quite anticipate that, and the vaccine is not protecting most people from it. It's protecting them partially, like it does help. And also the vaccine each year gives us some immunity to next year's flu. So I think the same thing will probably happen for COVID-19. But like you say, for the 1918 pandemic, how did we solve that? We didn't. We just survived it, right? So what happened with that one was we all got immunity. Well, I say we, what I mean is like, our great-grandparents. And then the great-grandparents protected the rest of us for basically the rest of their lives. Like there was many pandemics like that popped up. Like there was a 1957 outbreak in Hong Kong, and it wasn't nearly as bad. I mean, it was somewhat bad, but it wasn't nearly as bad as the one in 1918. And it's thought that the old people are protecting us essentially because they're basically creating herd immunity. And so then as the old people die off, then we're losing a lot of this immunity. COVID-19 is interesting because it's affecting a lot of old people. So that is, like if you're losing more old people because of the new disease, then they're not protecting you from other diseases, and there's all kinds of potential things that could happen.
How do you think people? I mean, how will society sort of deal with this? Are we just waiting for a vaccine? We'll just like stay inside, or as perhaps is being shown in parts of the U.S., people are getting impatient. Let's open up beaches again. I mean, it's an open-ended question because the future right now is so unknowable to me that I don't know. How do you see this going basically for the rest of 2020, I guess?
Yeah, I think we'll come out of lockdown probably, my guess is midsummer. I actually think mid-June will come out. There's actually some indications we might even be ready earlier. But I'm sure we will go back into it, right? So we will have a second wave. There's almost no question about that. And I think what will happen is we'll be better at going back in, right? Like the first lockdown took time because we'd never done this before. But by the third or fourth lockdown, we're going to be very efficient at getting into lockdown. People know what to do. They have the infrastructure set up and so on. The danger, of course, is by the third or fourth one, people say, well, I'm kind of sick of this now, and we're going to go to lockdown every couple of months, and then people get complacent, and then that means more lockdowns because people are like it depends on a critical number of people doing the right thing, and you can absorb some people who don't do it, but you can't absorb too many of them, and so it's kind of crappy because it means that the people who are doing the right thing and staying home are really trying to do it to offset the people who are not doing it, and if you get these kind of like riots about like I need to go to the beach or whatever, then yeah, this could end badly. But this is how it's always been. Like if you look at smallpox, there was a vaccine invented in like the 1700s, late 1700s, and immediately what happened is once it was proven that it's saved lives and everyone used to have like 10 kids because 7 of them are going to die of smallpox. Suddenly your kids are not dying. Well, everybody got the vaccine. What happened next? Well, there was no smallpox. So a generation later, people said, why are we getting this vaccine that's not doing anything? Because everyone's alive now, right? And so they stopped taking the vaccine. Another generation later, all the kids are dying of smallpox again. And so it kind of goes back and forth like this because people are really bad at doing things unless they're forced to, right? Unless you make people do stuff, they won't do it. And so this has been a constant struggle through the whole of human history, and we only learn lessons the hard way. And I think we're going to learn a lot of hard lessons through COVID-19, and I think we will improve some things. I think we will be, if we don't invest more in healthcare, right, it's bad for everyone, right? And I think this is going to be a lesson learned. You can't just kind of treat the rich. You have to treat the poor as well. We're only as healthy as the least healthy person in our society when it comes to something like a pandemic. And so, that means, well, if we're flattening the curve, what we're trying to do is bring the curve down to the hospital system level. We could also bring the hospital system up. And that's what China did. They just built hospitals in weekends. And so that's a great way of kind of unflattening the curve, if you will. So if we invest more in hospitals and ventilators and so on, so that we're more ready for this. Now, of course, the irony is we knew all this already. Right? We long known that we were overdue for a pandemic, and this information has been on politicians' desks for a long time, and it was ignored. And I think a lot of sort of politicians will cry about sort of, oh, we have to lower taxes. And my hope is that lower taxes becomes a dirty word because lower taxes means less infrastructure, and infrastructure is the only thing that separates us from everywhere else in the world that has these pandemics all the time. Like I lived in Africa last year, like all my students got malaria, right? And it's just like it was just everywhere, right? You see just multiple waves of like diseases happening all the time. And we in the Western world have not had that because we've had a really cushy ride of it because we built a lot of infrastructure. But we've been kind of chipping away that infrastructure for the last kind of 40 years or so, since about the 80s, because we think we didn't need it and it's wasting money and so on. Well, now we're paying the price for that. So, we're learning lessons the hard way like we always have to.
I know. I get it. And I've opined on this podcast before that, perhaps the way that we could sort of change society in a drastic way is to shut it all down, which is almost impossible. Well, now society basically has shut down. So now is a chance to not just sort of get things back to normal, but to actually maybe improve on things when we have to start it up again,
Yeah, exactly. And I mean, you see this happening through history, like in the Black Plague, the church was all powerful and, people were dying and asking the church and saying, what do I do? And everything the church said was not very helpful, and people still died or they lost their relatives or whatever. And also priests died and things like that. So it effectively broke the back of the church. Like the church was just never as powerful again. It also, totally changed labor practices because, mostly it was, of course, the poor and the weak dying. So all the serfs were dying off. So the landowners had no one else. So what did they do? They said, well, let's go find people elsewhere. So they invented colonization, right? And so, you see massive changes to the world because of this disease. And I think we're going to see changes here. I think it's a function of how long we're facing it for, right? If we get a vaccine and it's all over, and by September or something we're all back to normal, we'll see this as kind of a bit of a blip. But if it goes on for years or even decades, right, then it's a massive societal change, right? So we will adapt in one way or another.
Fascinating. I feel like we could do an entire podcast about this, Robert. But, we could. Thanks for giving us and the listeners a small taste of what you do and how this pandemic is progressing and where we can go from there. And I look forward to reading the rest of the book. I only quickly bought it from Verse Books a couple days ago and read the chapter on pandemics and stuff. But I love Doctor Who and the Silurians too, so I look forward to reading your book about that. So Robert Smith, thank you very much.
Oh, thanks for having me.
Thank you, Robert. Anyway, on that note, let's move on to regular good old Doctor Who news. How about, hey? That sounds like fun. The neat thing is that we talked at the beginning of the show about, scripts being written and production being ready to sort of start up again at a moment's notice. Clearly the the creative vibes have continued because Chris Chibnall has actually been sort of commissioning people to write things for Doctor Who. Pete McTighe wrote a short story a couple weeks ago now, I think, and around the 13th Doctor. Stephen Moffat as well. Paul Cornell is the latest. He wrote The Shadow Passes that came out on the BBC website, a short story about the 13th Doctor as well. It went down very, very well. So I just love that, in spite of all this nonsense, I feel like the BBC has actually stepped up quite a lot with these short stories. I know they aren't necessarily, directly involved with the tweetalongs, but those have continued apace. As we recorded this, we recorded this on a Saturday, so this will have happened by the time, or will be happening by the time you listen to this. But there's a big one, Stolen Earth Journey's End. So like a 2-part story, which is a new one. They usually have only settled on one episode at a time. With RTD, David Tennant, Catherine Tate, John Barrowman, Freema Agyeman, Graham Harper, who very charmingly started a Twitter account and didn't quite understand what it was. And so his first tweet was, "Emily, I am tweeting now. Are you getting this?" And he sent it to just anyone in general. And RTD replies to it, says, "Oh, Graham Harper, you're there. Oh, hello. Yes, this RTD contact has been made," which was just a lovely moment on Twitter. So that will have happened. Also, what will have happened is the RTD, with the blessing of Elizabeth Sladen's family, has made a mini episode, Farewell, Sarah Jane. I'm glad I haven't watched that yet because we haven't seen it yet, obviously, because that might get me, because that could be sad, because of course
I have avoided all these rather cryrific things that happen. Because I'm like, I don't need another reason to feel bad.
It's like touching is one thing. I sometimes you just want to be entertained. But so that will have happened by the time you listen to this, which is why we aren't necessarily talking about it right now. Emily Cook has done amazing work just roping in people to do these things at relatively short notice. I mean, I understand that a lot of creative types have a lot of time in their hands, perhaps.
Well, I mean, somebody like David Tennant, who's doing the Series 4 finale thing. I mean, he has 83 children, and I'm sure it keeps busy with all that. Plus, I wouldn't be surprised if he's still able to do like some voiceover stuff. Like I saw something I know he's done like nature documentary voiceover stuff in the past. So, I mean, he could do things like that. He could record Big Finish, for crying out loud.
Oh yeah. Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, I mean Toby Haydock.
I like how it's a moral imperative. You could
do this.
Finish Tenet.
Got me. There's no reason why you shouldn't be able to do this now, Eccleston. Get a microphone, Eccleston. Come on.
Put on our David Richardson hats, and we'll try to wrangle Eccleston for Big Finish. Sure.
Listen, I did my best. Okay, I did it on stage in front of thousands of people without even mentioning Big Finish, alluding. Hopefully he would connect. And he said, "Do you up for Big Finish?" That's me doing my bad Christopher Eccleston accent. That's just, okay. I clearly see that people have asked you this before. Perhaps Big Finish themselves. So that'll be intriguing.
Yes, what a surprise that other people have asked him this.
That'd be fast. I mean, I know that, if RTD's involved, probably Eccleston wouldn't be involved in one of these tweet-alongs, so it'd be half of one or the other, I think. And I don't know if Eccleston would be doing a tweet-along anyway, but...
he doesn't strike me as the kind of guy who wants to be on Twitter all that bad, and can't say I blame him.
No, I was mildly surprised when he jumped on Instagram, actually, when he did. But there had been other ones. There was the Heaven Sent one, which was amazing with Rachel Talalay, and Peter Capaldi sent a note. This happened during my grocery shop, because the funny thing is because these creative types have so much time on their hands that these things happen and are like scheduled, and then like they happen. Like, so, by the way, this is happening, and it's tomorrow.
Like half of our news list, more or less, is like this tweet-along stuff.
Tweet-alongs, yeah.
Mostly because, and most of them are retrospectives, because they've already happened, because it's like, hey, in 2 days' time, this is going ahead, because people actually have the ability to, it's not necessarily the wrangling side of things. I'm sure that can take a little bit longer, potentially. But once things are in place, it can happen so fast. And
I'd like to point out, and Stephen has the same problem, we're both working from home. There's no way we can actually participate in these damn things. Participate meaning watch them.
Yeah.
Well, for us, I mean, because everything's set to British time, of course. So for us, it's...
That too,
It's a little tougher, etc. Because it is like the middle of the day. But... like they just happen so fast, and so everything so far pretty much has had some sort of bonus content, as we'll talk about momentarily for other stuff. But it's I like that it's not just that these are happening, but there's more being brought to it as well, like Capaldi's message.
Yeah. That the thing you alluded to, Saran Jones' message for the Doctor's Wife one. Arthur Darvill reprised his role as Rory for the first time in 8 years to do a quick little thing to camera as he sort of talked.
Karen Gillan in there too.
Karen Gillan is with a slight voiceover. She obviously contributed a line. It wasn't on the actual thing, but it's still quite lovely.
Which I would applaud for health reasons.
Yeah. So yeah, it was. It's been kind of nice actually to see how people who have, long since left Doctor Who are still like more than eager to sort of contribute new content to this whole thing during this whole thing, both for our sanity and perhaps theirs as well.
And for the Doctor's Wife one, Neil Gaiman also talked, at least to a point, about like cut scenes and alternative scenes and script drafts and things like that as well. So I mean, things that you might normally never hear about, like things that aren't even necessarily covered in Doctor Who extras and confidentials and whatnot.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, it's because script changes aren't as fun and sexy and exciting as wire work and stuff. And
Swimming with sharks.
I knew you'd bring up the swimming with sharks.
We have to bring up the swimming with sharks, I
suppose. Radio Times has also sort of been doing the tortured ones. Kiss Kiss Bang Bang. What happened on this Friday the 17th? I mentioned the Heaven Sent one. And at the end of the Journey's End Stolen Earth one, I imagine they'll probably announce the next one whenever that is.
Probably.
So we'll talk about how it happened on the next episode, because it will have happened already.
Well, the Series 4 finale one it was announced, well, I think Saturday last week. So it's actually had some time to gestate, which has proved a positive thing, because initially it was just RTD and Graham Harper. Yeah. And then in the intervening days, they've added Tennant and Tate and Adgerman and Barrowman.
Yeah. Well, Emily Cook was saying that I'm going to work on other people. Like, she actually said, like, here, retweet this. I have to work on getting other people involved in this. And so it was,
But I mean, even still, things like, getting Tate and Tennant, for example. I mean, obviously those are the people that the fans would want to participate, but it doesn't mean you're going to get them.
No, that's true. But for the most part, I mean, even if it's just a message, as Peter Capaldi sent along, it's enough sometimes. Like, what else do they have to say about it? And this is just what they want to contribute. And I think it's kind of neat. I think it's kind of neat that they're still willing to do this for people.
For the Heaven Sent one, it was Talalay, Moffat, and Jamie Reed Quarrel, who played the Veil. And then I saw that, I think it was Rachel Talalay also tweeted out some stuff about like pre-visualization work that Ben Pickles did on some of the shots. And
oh wow!
Like, so even he got involved.
Vancouver's own Ben Pickles.
Yeah. We chose that moment once again to plug the fact that Talalay came on this damn podcast and did a commentary for Heaven Sent. This is how much she adores that thing, that she'd sink that low to talk about it with us.
Wow.
Yeah.
Some self-confidence we got there.
Yeah, you bet. Which is amazing. The people who make Doctor Who clearly love Doctor Who. This was more than just a job to them. Until I see Arthur Darvill do locked in videos for Legends of Tomorrow, or maybe a Broadchurch thing. I don't know. Maybe that's a thing as well. They could too.
I don't know if you need locked in videos for Broadchurch. That seems like a very bad idea. Legends of Tomorrow, perhaps.
Yeah. Also, this one, so apparently, I've seen sing-alongs where people sort of record their ends of songs and stuff, and they put them together, and they have sort of a choir effect. Some friends and I, for what it's worth, are recording individual tracks because I have an electronic drum set at home, and I play along to that, and a couple of friends add some guitar tracks and bass tracks. So we've been adding stuff of cover songs just for fun to pass the time. It's kind of neat. But Doctor Who is now getting on this. They're doing a lockdown sing-along for the song Long Song from the Rings of Akaten. Long Song being basically both the title of that episode and the description, because it's just a 50-minute song, which is why I dislike it so much. But hey!
One of the many reasons.
If you like it, if you like Rings of Akaten, it's one of literally a handful of Doctor Who episodes in the 50-odd year history of the show that I actually actively hate, which is a good percentage when you think about it. Feel free.
I love Stephen Bile, by the way. It's so rare and wonderful.
I know. There are so few episodes that I just this is terrible, and that's one of them. That's a good batting average. Some people like Warren here hate entire eras of the show. I think,
just one entire era of the show. Just one.
That week in the spring of 2013, wow, that was a bad week. That's it. It's all right. You might love it though. You might love it, and you could submit your own track for the long song, and I can cobble it together and make it better than the actual episode itself. There we are, ending with a backhanded compliment. So, speaking of Sarah Jane Smith, because Sarah Jane Adventures, Big Finish has announced that the Return of the Cybermen, which is one of the lost stories that Big Finish is doing, it's basically the original version of Revenge of the Cybermen, with Tom Baker, of course, reprising his role as the fourth Doctor Who. The roles of Sarah Jane Smith and Harry Sullivan. Christopher Naylor will be playing Harry Sullivan. Sadie Miller, daughter of Elizabeth Sladen, will be playing Sarah Jane Smith.
Mm-hmm. I saw some hullabaloo about this, and I say if anybody's going to play the daughter, or Sarah Jane Smith. It should be her actual real-life daughter.
Yeah.
Also, I just pre-ordered it, so I'm curious as to hear how this sounds.
Oh, well, yeah, it's been bumped up to January 2021. I think its original release date was slightly later.
Well, now we have time to listen to a lot of Big Finish. So,
well, it's not coming out for another 8 months, but
even in the press of the news release blurb, Sadie Miller was saying how she was even hesitant to step into her mother's shoes.
I can understand. It's like Julian Lennon stepping in for John during a Beatles reunion concert in the 1980s.
We've got I can't remember his first name. Julian Glover's son playing
Jamie Glover. Yeah,
Jamie Glover playing Ian in the Big Finish stuff because of Adventure in Space and Time. Mm-hmm. So I don't know. Maybe they need to like redo the Crusades or something, and Jamie Glover can.
Redo City of Death. Although Julian Glover's still around, and it's quite awesome. I'll have you know.
That's true. That's true.
That's both true. By the way, as far as January 2021 goes, I have, at last count, 10 different series that I have to get through.
Wow.
in my backlog, including Star Cops, you'll be happy to know.
Oh, wow.
So, yeah.
It's a long ways away. You know what? I've gone back and forth when it comes to like recasting roles for people who are no longer with us, sadly, because it for the longest time, basically Katie Manning had to do like just solo companion stories essentially because Joan Partley is no longer with us, of course, and so like it was kind of a disservice to having like here's a companion, here's someone who really wants to like dive in and have full cast stories. So why don't we just get someone else to play in the Doctor? And I've now sort of like moved, like it's moving away from the actor is tied to that role as rather the character has now becoming timeless. Like imagine, like think back, if you will, as I compare Doctor Who to Shakespeare. Bear with me here. It's kind of like, what if there's like way back in the day in the late 1500s and stuff, and there's like the guy who like plays Hamlet on stage for Shakespeare plays, and then suddenly someone else plays Hamlet. Like, was there like a furore thinking, no, the definitive Hamlet is played by that fellow right there. How dare you recast the role of Hamlet? And here we are today. You know what I mean? Like the character. I think the characters themselves, I think, are becoming a more timeless entity as opposed to just something that an actor played way back when.
I think the preponderance of reboots, like what we had, 3 Spider-Mans in a space of 15 years.
Yeah.
4 really, if you count Spider-Man Far From Home. You just kind of get used to it at this point. Also, with peak TV, that means a whole pile of other stuff gets made with new people in it. So it's just more content out there, which necessitates this. Also, this is a 50-odd-year-old show. Yeah. This is going to happen.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, so I've moved on that. So it's kind of neat. And having said, there's obviously a personal connection there with Sadie Miller there as Sarah Jane Smith. So
yeah, if you're gonna do it, presumably do it right like this. I'm fine with that.
Yep. Also the same cats who did the unofficial Doctor Who annual in 1972, because there was no Doctor Who annual in 1972. Why would you have an annual leading up to the 10th anniversary of the show? There's no reason. So I can totally understand why they wouldn't do that. I think we talked about this happening a while back. It is now happening. The Master Annual 2074 is now out. So you can read all sorts of different stories about the Master puzzles, all the type of annual stuff. It's a non-profit thing. It's all for a good cause. Alistair Pearson's involved with a whole host of other people who have written for various magazines in the past. So links in the show notes. You can get that. You can get your own Master Annual 2074.
I gather it's fairly Delgado heavy, which is fine.
Well, of course. It's sort of written in that 70s style. So. Yeah. He was the master in this.
And he is the chairman of the board, so,
He damn right he is chairman of the board. I tell you what. DWAS, a couple of things from DWAS, Doctor Who Appreciation Society, their upcoming Capital Convention, which was going to take place somewhere in the corporeal universe, is now going to be online. It's a virtual convention on Saturday, the 25th of April. These are becoming a thing now, let me tell you, these virtual conventions. because there was like Convid. There was like a whole convention happening online.
Nebulas are doing it.
Yeah, like
July,
on Friday, like there's like Andrew Smith and like Stephen Gallagher amongst others were like doing bits for a convention that I literally heard about as it was happening. That's how fast these things can be arranged.
Well, and for work stuff, I've gone going to more conventions or just webinars instead.
Yeah, it's fascinating. I mean, I know Phantom Films, as we said, has been doing things the past couple. I don't think they're doing it this Saturday as we record this, or maybe they are, and we'll just find out about it as we record it. But CapitalCon, Capital Contact, you get it? Capital Contact has been made. Is going to happen this coming Saturday online. Links in the show notes to find out where you can watch along with that. People like Stephen Burkhoff, who of course was in Doctor Who that one time, and there's also John Colshaw, a whole bunch of other people. So, as I said, links in the show notes. RadioFreeScaro.com for details. Also, DWAS is bringing back TARDIS magazine, the official magazine of the Doctor Who Appreciation Society, which started up in the summer of 1976 and probably had the poll that ranked The Deadly Assassin the worst story of season 14, and then continued on in various forms until 2003. Is now coming back. It's coming back as a proper actual magazine. Is it an online magazine? I imagine just an online magazine, but
you would think so, yeah. Because print is insane.
It is, yeah.
It costs a lot.
That's true. So it's coming back, so that's pretty cool.
It also necessitates you driving things to places, which in these current times is not a good idea.
Difficult to do these days. So they are. A sign of where we're at is this: San Diego Comic-Con, for the first time in their 50-year history, is canceled. This July is supposed to take place.
They took their sweet time announcing this too.
Yeah.
You know what they did, because it like appeared on their website and other people were reporting it, and I was looking like maybe we should tweet this from there, and like their Twitter account didn't even bother like tweeting it, which was very strange. It's not necessarily a like, oh, well, we're going to be in lockdown until July. We might still be in lockdown until July. But the fact is that while online conventions can happen in 3 days, San Diego Comic-Con is a monster. And
it's 300,000 people. That is the height of irresponsibility if they do that. Like they can't.
Well, that too, and just because, like, let's say, oh, look, we've cured everything. Everything's fine in May. You that is no time to
get into a costume and just wander around.
I'm just saying it takes weeks and months of organizing and everything else, logistics in the background that actually make these things happen. So
the other thing about this, just to throw some raw business into it, is if you look at E3, which is kind of ahead of the curve on this, Nintendo, for one, have just said, we're not going to participate in E3 itself. We're just going to put our video out at the same time. And other companies are starting to do the same thing. There is, at least on the movie side, obviously the comics are a different story, but at least on the movie side of San Diego Comic-Con, there's no reason the studios can't just do that and get more or less the same amount of response out of it.
Yeah. They control their own message.
They do that this year, and then they'll see how that worked for them or didn't. Of course, they've got the problem of they have to put that stuff out for movies that aren't coming out till November now, right? Or next year or the year after that, because everything's pushed back. So it's, who knows? We'll see.
We will see. Yeah, 2020 is going to be basically a write-off for a lot of entertainment companies. Like anything that was going to be in production. Or actually, no. Like, TV shows, I feel like they can do it. Because if
animated shows, they still can.
Yeah,
because all of it is remote to begin with.
I mean, if it's already in the can, like James Bond film is in the can. It's done. It's ready to go. But why put it? You can't put it in theaters because there's no theaters to go to right now. But like TV shows, if they're in the can, bring them out.
Speaking of which, how far along is Doctor Who? Or we're going to see a delay on that?
Oh, we totally will see a delay, I think. But as I said at the beginning of the show, and indeed last week with Paul Wilmshurst, you think like things can spring up very quickly. But I would not be surprised if we would get no Doctor Who in 2021 just because of the delay of how it might enter into production. I mean, September's a long ways away. We'll see where we're at, but yeah, it could be a long couple of years between seasons of Doctor Who, which of course is the paramount issue in the world right now.
Well, clearly,
yeah.
San Diego Comic-Con, I see on their website they still have a countdown to to 2020.
Maybe change that.
Ticking away. So I think they need to take that off their website.
Maybe employ tech support and website people. Very important people when you're running a convention, just saying. Yeah, I mean, that casts a lot. I mean, Calgary Expo somewhat confidently said, oh, well, it's supposed to happen this weekend, the original version. They said, well, we've postponed it to the weekend before San Diego Comic-Con. That's when there's supposed to be.
No, you haven't.
I really don't think that's going to happen. Edmonton Expo is supposed to happen in September. Iffy, and then you think about the conventions that we're, connected to, like, Chicago TARDIS in November and Gallifrey 1.
Well, Warren, you were planning on going to Worldcon in New Zealand.
I was.
In July,
and the thing is, it's now virtual, so I may still, quote unquote, go. But it all depends on how, not to get too inside baseball, but their membership was like close to $300 Canadian. And
yeah.
I'm not paying that for a virtual conference. I'll pay it for, I'll pay half that.
I was going to say,
the Nebulas are $150, I think. And I'm willing to pay $150 for a whole weekend of like seminars and panels and workshops and stuff like that. But the Nebulas sort of tend to be more businessy than Worldcon. Have a Worldcon seeing your friends. So I can do that myself without paying a lot of money if it's the same, if it's over the internet.
Yeah. I don't, you're right. Like $300 Canadian for watching a screen seems like a lot. I don't know what's going to happen there. I am lucky enough to be a Hugo finalist. I wonder how the Hugos are going to work. Are they just going to be?
Well, those have always been live streamed for free, right?
Well, yes, from an auditorium. Are they going to have a bunch of people? Is there going to be a giant Zoom call with all like the finalists and stuff? Or are we just going to sort of find out? I mean, it'll be.
I bet it'll be a video thing like they did with the nominees.
Yeah.
Just a recording that they put out, quote unquote, live.
Yeah, that could be it. Yeah, which worked well because anytime you try to do live streaming, something always messes up. So,
yep.
We will see. Last bit of news before the Miniscope. Pip Baker, one half of Pip and Jane Baker, has passed away, joining his wife who predeceased him a few years ago. Pip and Jane Baker, say what you will about them. They wrote Doctor Who scripts, and they wrote them fast. And I think amongst 2/3 of this podcast, certainly, I think there's been a certain reappraisal of their work. I think Mark of the Ronnie has aged considerably well, and it's my favorite Colin Baker story now, I think. Of course, they wrote Time of the Ronnie, and a massive achievement for writing episode 14 of Trial of a Time Lord, having been told a couple things about what happened in episode 13 and not being told at all about how they originally were supposed to end it because Eric Sayward pulled the script off the table and says, and also, can you have it done by tomorrow? And they did it, damn it. Pip and Jane Baker did it. So kudos to them. I think it's, looking back on Doctor Who, it's a lot easier to sort of pick out stuff. And when you see a story like Time and the Ronnie, and maybe it's not your cup of tea, but at least, there are other episodes to choose from. I look
back
at them.
It is not my cup of tea.
I know it's not your cup of tea because then they think, well, I didn't like that one. Let's watch Pyramids of Mars instead. Well, at the time, it was perhaps a little more controversial. I quite like Pip and Jane Baker's stuff, so I'm A-okay with them. So sad news that Pip Baker died. Chris, you like Pip and Jane Baker episodes, don't you? Mostly? Probably? Some?
Yeah, I'm with Chris on this one.
To a point. I mean, Vervoids is watchable.
It's fun. It is fun.
I'm not a fan of Mark of the Ronnie. I'm not a fan of Time of the Ronnie.
Oh.
Episode 14 of
I don't mind Mark
Episode 14 of Trial is a hodgepodge of not good stuff. So I think it's when you say 2/3, I think it's going to be 2/3 probably against.
Well, hope you enjoyed your tribute, Pip Baker, writer of Doctor Who.
I went easier on him than Chris Chibnall did in 1986. So.
That's true. That's very true.
I'm sure Chris Chibnall regrets that.
If he does, I don't think he'll ever come out and say it.
No. Well, on that, we ended a downturn at the end of the news list with a downturn, which the only way back is up. And that will happen now as we talk about director Paul Wilmshurst in the Miniscope.
Could be a theme park from the future. Or it might be inside a Miniscope.
Oh, shut up.
A Miniscope, yes, of course, why not?
Director Paul Wilmshurst, I always like these miniscopes that we allows us to talk to the person and then talk about their stuff. It's a rarity in this podcast of our. We've only done it a few times. I think we had Michael E. Bryant on. Peter Howell, I think, was one way back when, and
Mark Ayers on to talk about Dick Mills.
Mark Ayers to talk, and indeed Mark Ayers
And himself as well.
Yeah, I think we've had music on for. We had Roger Lim. I remember he was on the show, and we talked about his music as well. So it's neat. It's a neat opportunity we get to do that. But now we're diving in. As I told Paul Wilmshurst in my email to him, like we're pretty much fans of the show, so you don't have to worry about us laying into him.
This is news.
I know this is not going to be like Peter Moffat or anything like that. Kill the Moon, Mummy on the Orient Express, and Last Christmas, all made in fairly short succession. In the space year of 2014, was it? Yeah, it was 2014. That's right. Kill the. I did. It was only 3 episodes, but I know, Warren, you're busier than the two of us. Perhaps did you have a chance to watch all 3, Warren?
Not all 3. I didn't get a chance to watch Last Christmas. I listened to most of the interview and watched both Kill the Moon and Orient Express. Both of them on mute with captions because I had to work at the same time.
That's right.
But I'm watching the shots, so...
Thankfully you're looking at the visuals, so...
Yeah, allows you to focus on the visuals. So, Kill the Moon, which was, of course, shot a chunk of it over the course of 4 days in Lanzarote. And then back in the studio. What I loved about the interview is that basically Wilmshurst, who had been to Lanzarote in the 1980s, and said, when he got the commission, sort of like, we're doing this thing, it's on the moon, it's actually on the moon, and like he thought, what if we did it in Lanzarote? And like within days, they were in Lanzarote scouting locations. I mean, that's how quick sometimes these things can work. And it looked fabulous. The moon looked fabulous. Let's put it that way.
Yeah,
it looked amazing.
Well, the locations I found were like, because everything was like the black volcanic ash and whatnot, and they actually found stuff that was a great start, and the grading that they did after the fact was just made everything everything was just so much contrast, like so much black and white, and then you throw the orange spacesuits in there, and they just pop.
What I love about it is, as per the interview, is that basically they do sky replacement. They shoot it during the day so they get the contrasty light. But basically, even though you can do all the CG stuff, a lot of it is letting your brain do the work for them. So they get a few sky shots, and the rest of it is just you kind of going, "Oh yeah, of course that's the moon." And it's all down to you, like it always has been in film and TV, no matter what level you're at.
Yeah, but
I mean, it doesn't. The visuals can help the brain along by inserting, a shot of the Earth in the background.
Mm-hmm. Right, but then you're doing the rest of the work, and they're cleverly sort of working around what they don't have on them, or that they don't have to do extra work. They've kind of egged the pudding, as it were.
Yeah, they've laid it on. Like they're walking through a spaceship, which they actually brought to Lanzarote, and then you're on the moon, and then you're. I have to watch it again, knowing that you actually don't see the sky very much. You mostly just see the surface.
That's what I mean.
And yeah, one of the aspects
you see just enough.
One of the aspects of the storytelling that makes the visuals so much easier as well is Harness throws in the line about the baby creature inside the moon is so big that it's added gravity to make it Earth normal, so that when they're walking on the surface, you don't have to worry about them, bouncing up and down like they would if it was actual 1/6 gravity.
Yep. So
take that, Space 1999,
or indeed the Moon Base 1967. It's a good marriage between a line in the script and how it affects the plot, and scouting out locations.
Mind you,
unlike practicals. Yeah.
Mind you, like in the Moon Base where they use the T tray to block the window, there's the the big metal plate that does it in this one.
I often wondered if that was an homage, and
I don't know if it is, but I like to think it is.
Yeah.
Now in Expanse, some poor Foley guy has to put in magnetic boot sounds every time somebody moves.
That's true. Yeah. I thought there was this is a testament to how TV is made these days, but like the shots of them looking around the moon base before they found the power source to turn the lights on, are basically all lit just by the lights in the helmets.
Yeah, I took note of that as well. Later on in the sequence, you see them, the flashlight lights.
Yeah.
But for the first little bit, it's just all helmet lights, and it gives it a really, really, really creepy vibe.
All 3 of these stories are a lot with a little. Like they're really they haven't got much to work with, to be honest with you. Even Mummy and the Orient Express looks lavish, but when you think about it, it's not. Like,
no, it's on a tube. It's like they're shooting on this little set
with
basically.
2 sets or so.
Yeah.
The directive to harness from Moffat for the first half was to Hinchcliffe the bleep out of it.
Yeah.
And so obviously Wilmshurst has to adapt what's in the script to those visuals.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, the visuals are good. The what I asked him, and he actually didn't quite remember how he did this shot. But my favorite shot of the whole thing is just as the moon base is about to explode, basically, and they have to.
I know which one you're talking about.
Down the hall, and the camera sort of swoops in. The Steadicam shot sort of swoops in like real time, and it goes up to the Jenna Coleman, and then all of a sudden the shot slows down as they start running down the hallway. That was such an iconic shot, and they cut to another one of them just running down the hallway in slow motion. I thought, what a great way to make a hero moment out of running down a corridor, which is the most Doctor Who thing ever, you know? It was pretty good. I'm trying to think what other visual stuff or stuck out for you for Kill the Moon. Either of you, anyone?
When they're still in the Mexican base, using POV shots for the spider, I thought was kind of neat. Because
the spider effects themselves are great too.
You don't really see that. And then just before Tony Asoba's character gets attacked, there's it's the way it's done. It's just a series of quick cuts, like just a lot of quick cuts, which just gives the whole suspenseful kind of feel to it.
And it also hides the rubber spider. That's a great thing.
Sure, yeah.
Yeah.
And then the stuff that's, going to be influenced by the director and writer, I don't doubt, but still mostly on the actors themselves. When Capaldi does the moon's an egg line, he's just got this smirk on his face, and just the way he delivers the line is just amazing.
Yeah.
And then the part that seems to get a lot of the praise, the only praise from those who hate the episode, I quite adore it. Jenna Coleman's performance at the end of the episode.
Oh yeah, exactly.
Just the way she just delivers her lines and the intensity and passion is just. I mean, again, that's mostly on Coleman, obviously, but the director's going to have their say.
Well, the director, it's not just shots, as we've said on these things in the past. It's not just like how we position the camera and stuff. It's also directing the actors, but also just giving them the space to provide that performance. Like when you listen to,
possibly knowing when not to direct them.
That too. When you listen to Wilmshurst talk about it on last week's episode, like that intensity wasn't there when they're sort of doing a rehearsal or a read through, because how can you I'm just going to go full on and like cry and stuff during the rehearsal for it. But the
read through is also in many cases the first, maybe the second time that they've actually seen that, so they haven't had a chance to mentally develop what they want to do in a given scene.
Right. Yeah. It does. But then once the cameras are rolling, like that's when you get like, and as Paul said, it's like he almost thinks like, did she almost surprised herself with the amount of intensity that happened. And with that intensity, that also gives Peter Capaldi like that. Okay, whoa, geez, there's an actual proper reaction here. Like that changes his performance now in reaction to what she's doing. I love the quick little. I just love the way it was shot, because it was, mostly on Jenna, the close up, but even like when Capaldi just said yes. Like it's such a quick little shot to cut away to that, but his yes is actually important to the thing. It's not just a standard reaction shot. For the most part, it was just stuck on Jenna Coleman during that. I quite like the editing of that. And of course, as we've discussed on this show, in Britain, directors are involved in the editing process as opposed to the content gathering that happens in North America and stuff. So that whole editing is part of the director's job too.
When you ask that question on the interview, he's like, "Oh yes."
Yeah, he was it's just like, yes, much better to work in the UK. Maybe not as lucrative financially, but still, you get a better product. You get a better product when you talk about it.
And greater job satisfaction when you have that much input throughout the entirety of the process.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I've always been a fan of Kill the Moon, even before I met Peter Harness, so and then I heard the reaction that people actually didn't like it. I don't know. I think it's mostly the story, perhaps, and not the direction. I think it's a pretty tautly paced and well directed and acted episode.
I think it's really just the egg part that gets on people's nerves more than anything else.
Oh, totally, yeah, and also perhaps the Doctor abandoning Clara and stuff. But I don't know.
It was a shock, I have to say.
The egg stuff and the supposition, real or not, that it's all about pro-life, pro-choice debates and like people taking it out to certain tangents that maybe do or don't exist.
Yeah, the word.
Well, I mean, I didn't think of it, but that doesn't mean it wasn't there. You know what I mean? Like, or there to be looked at. It just means I didn't pick up on it.
Yeah,
I enjoyed it when it went out. I watched all 3 of the episodes yesterday. And I still enjoyed it a lot. I got, I think, more out of it this time because I got the Capaldi Years Blu-ray set almost a year and a half ago at this point. And I watched season 8 about a year ago, a little over a year ago. And I skipped some of the episodes just because I'm like, I've seen that enough times already. I like that one. I don't need to see it again. And Kill the Moon was one of the ones I skipped at the time.
Oh.
So I hadn't seen it for, I don't know, a few years. But going through it again yesterday, it was, still very enjoyable. And I picked up more of the story than I had in the past.
I was reminded how much I adore Capaldi and Coleman as a Doctor companion duo. Still my favorite season, I think.
And this is still only halfway through Capaldi's first series where he's, like the Doctor's still trying to find his feet.
Yep. Yeah. It's but the directive of the script, I mean, not necessarily the direction, but was like the Doctor and Clara have a big falling out at the end of it. Like this is sort of the depth of their relationship before they sort of build it back up. And it's, it's weird to sort of jump in because I haven't watched Capaldi for a couple of years at least, to see it at its lowest ebb right here. And then you see it start to pick back up again. Then of course we watch The Last Christmas where it finally culminates into like, hey, we're happy to travel around together. Let's go have fun again. So
Capaldi's not as bad as the Smith era for jumping in and going, wait a minute, we're in the middle of what arc now?
Yeah, that's true.
It still happens, but it's not as bad.
No, it isn't as bad. In the interest of time, let's press on to Mummy on the Orient Express, which is as different a episode as Kill the Moon because, as we mentioned, it's more or less shot on a one set, 2 train cars essentially, redressed as different train cars for parts of it. Jenna Coleman on set for one day. And Frank Skinner taking over the role of pseudo companion for this, perhaps. This is probably, I think, one of the most popular stories of Series 8 from the general public. I think a lot of people liked it a lot. I think it's really, really well done, and I also enjoy it. What do you two think?
I love the look of lavish horror to it because it's all elaborate and very much looks like an Orient Express kind of classy movie thing, but also it's got this horrific mummy thing happening at the same time, which works really well. Mm-hmm. It shouldn't, but it does.
Why shouldn't it? I don't know.
Well, just because that setting doesn't really lend itself to horror as well as, say, like a haunted house might or Hyde or something like that.
Yeah, right? it's lit. It's well lit.
That's what I mean. That's kind of makes it scarier.
Yeah,
because nobody else can see this thing. You know what I mean?
Yeah, the mummy is. The only one person can see it, but the mummy is in full view whenever we rarely see it. It cuts back to being. The people not seeing where the mummy is, but the mummy is in full view. Like we properly see the mummy. The mummy isn't hiding in the shadows. It's intended to be in full view, and it's terrifying whenever you see it.
And then a step beyond all that is we have the timer in the corner that only the audience can see.
Yeah,
which was a Moffat dictum according to the interview. Yeah,
it was a Moffat thing. I think it was fascinating to hear him talk about that because I'd wondered, I knew that Moffat had written it in, but I would wondered if that had happened pre or post writing of the script and indeed production of it, because he had to sort of tease some shots. He was going to maybe play with the timeline a little bit, as you do in television and film. You sort of play with that timeline because you're not necessarily looking at something in sequence. You know, when you're looking at a cutaway shot, that might just be something that is supposed to be happening at the same time as another shot. So you're sort of covering all the angles and stuff. But here, you are stuck to 66 seconds, and there's a clock timing you on it. It was so effective because you're thinking, well, we know this only. How is this person going to spend their 66 seconds? You know,
and between the shooting and the editing, you either have to pad or cut to fit those exactly 66 seconds as well.
Yeah.
So there's that much
and just
extra
in terms
work
of
involved.
physical space, there's only so many ways you can shoot this thing.
Yeah, there is. Yeah, I mean,
well, like, one of the first things I took down in my notes was like just the in the cold open to the episode. There's the tracking shot beside the train car, and that just kind of like sets and confirms the cramped nature of things. Even even though the doctor says, "Oh, it's an exact replica, except a bit bigger."
Yeah.
But it's still a train car. It's still got this confinement aspect.
Mm-hmm. Which works too, because where's this thing go? Straight forward, and you can't get away from it.
Exactly. Yeah. Although, you know, the set by the Lake Michael Pickwood was great though, because, you know, the walls came off where you could shoot stuff.
Oh, I'm sure.
Shoot through windows, you know, that sort of thing. You can get around that, but it was very ingenious use of a very narrow set to make for a very claustrophobic viewing experience. I think intentionally claustrophobic. It's pretty great. Wow, we just blow through Mummy on the Orient Express. It's good. Next.
I've got some other things I took down just for some like camera shots and things.
Well, like I said before, it's a lot with a little. Like there's the main train set, there's the back room, there's that lab. It's kind of it, right? So, but they managed to cut back and forth, and it works.
And the convenient dismissal of half the extras as well.
Yeah, it's true.
Through the episode.
Yeah,
so you have,
the ones that are just hard light
holograms.
holograms. Yeah, exactly. Like, well, we don't have to worry about those. Well, that's the thing about having extras in the background. You have to have them doing something. And, you know, anytime there's extras, and I sometimes I go, oh, what are the extras going to do in this? What are they going to do? Sometimes I've just drawn to watching that extra to see what that person
Peloton
does.
extras are the best.
Peloton extras, yes, exactly. What are they doing? How are they folding their arms in the background?
Mugging. That's what they're doing.
Mm-hmm.
Especially all the times that extras have ruined shots, but they couldn't do a retake, so they have to stick with what was done.
Mm-hmm. Yes.
Yeah. So a couple of things I just took down in my notes. When the doctor is talking to the captain, I don't know why it's not the conductor, but whatever, the captain. Just after the doctor is called a liar by what's her name that I can't remember.
Maisie.
Maisie? All right.
Maisie.
Yes, Maisie. The whole thing is shot from a low angle. Like we've talked in the past about, like, you know, Graham Harper, for example, shooting Daleks in Revelation from the floor up and such. It's not quite that extreme, but everything is shot at a low angle, which just puts you a little gives you a little bit of unease because it's not straight on. It's not what you might expect.
Mm-hmm. Especially an accusatory thing like that. You know, it's easier, like she's standing on high, essentially, accusing you from on down below. Like there's a certain natural, you know what I mean? Like there's a certain visual sort of translation when it comes to being accused that someone is like an adult chastising a child or something, that sort of thing.
Yeah, fine. And then shooting it like from the kid's POV in that instance. Yeah,
it's a visual grammar, but you got to be careful to balance it out, right?
Exactly.
And then the introduction of Perkins, you got Frank Skinner at the back of the train car in the shadows, kind of slowly coming out of the shadows. You get a bit of light coming through the window, but it's still restricted for the most part.
And that you don't trust him because of that. You initially kind of like, he's sort of being cagey, and he's sort of letting on a lot that he already knows. Like he feels like he's already versed in the situation. And so your initial reaction to Frank Skinner's character is to not trust him, which I think is probably the intention at that point.
Totally. As well as the exchange between Capaldi and Skinner. It just outlines how much they don't trust each other. And then not long after that, when Perkins comes to the doctor in the corridor of the sleeper car, he's got all the, he's got the blueprints for the train and all this other data he's collected and whatnot. And the doctor is still like, what's going on here? And then Perkins is like, well, maybe I'm controlling the mummy, or maybe I've just been working on this for a while. Yeah. And then they actually start to, the relationship starts to go a little upward from there.
Yeah. They have a connection at that point. Oh, you're surly and old too, are you? Well, guess we're getting along now. Yeah. Anything else, Chris?
Yeah, I like the way that when you have the mummy in motion, anything it sees, so it's point of view shots, just the haziness and blurriness around the frame, just to have that visual. Like you don't have to think about whose eyes you're looking through. You know it's the mummy's because of just that distinct visual style.
There's probably gauze wrapped around its eyes. Probably that's why, like wrappings.
Something to indicate something like that for sure. Mm-hmm. And then at the toward the end of the story, when Perkins departs, there's the conversation. And Perkins starts down below the console level, and then it kind of comes up toward the console level. But the camera, when the Doctor and Perkins are talking, is up on like the higher level. So it's kind of like Nest looking down in on their conversation.
Yeah, it's almost like whenever there's like a really high angle, it's like it's like security cam. Is it like you're watching in on something that you probably shouldn't? You know, that's what I kind of like about those high angle shots. It feels like we're watching like a secret conversation. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
Good story, Mummy on the Orient Express, and partly because of the writing, but also because I think it's really well directed. And Peter Capaldi's awesome.
You spoke
right down to the jelly baby.
You spoke earlier of your dislike of Rings of Akaton.
Yep.
And Neil Cross, of course, wrote that because of the strength of Hyde.
Yes.
Jamie Matheson wrote Mummy on the Orient Express because of the strength of Flatline.
Yeah.
Thankfully, in this case, it worked a little better for you, hey?
Well, at least Jamie Matheson was given the directive of Mummy on the Orient Express and then went off and wrote it. I'm not sure Neil Cross ever had a thing like come up with something and submit it. I have no ideas. I've got to find out who's going to play an entirely new Doctor. So carry on. That's basically what Stephen Moffat said during the making of that. Last Christmas, which honestly, I mean, I thought A Christmas Carol was never going to be topped for number one Christmas special for me. I feel like Last Christmas might be there.
Nope, not for me.
Not for you still? No,
I like it. I like it quite a bit. It's just not like Christmas Carol.
Christmas Carol is amazingly. It's the most Christmassy of Christmas episodes. Let's put it that way. But oh man. I remember when I watched the 12 Doctor Who Christmas specials a couple years ago, leading up to probably Resolution, I think, and I was really struck by how much I enjoyed Last Christmas. I thought I enjoyed it at the time, but I think it's really even grown on me even more since then. It's a horror film. It's a horror movie at Christmas
with Santa.
With Santa.
It's a horror movie that takes its ideas from other horror movies and acknowledges that in that list that Shona has at the end of the movies she wants to watch over Christmas. Which is the most
brilliant way of acknowledging your sources and blatantly using them in an episode and then referencing them. It's such a cleverly written script.
And this is just me going off memory because I didn't get a chance to watch this one, but I do remember it looks a lot like those movies too. I like the fact that it looks grainy like old 70s and 80s horror films did.
Yeah. There's a definite John Carpenter, The Thing-ish vibe to it, you know?
Definitely.
Yeah. It, yeah.
Right down to things on people's backs or faces or whatever.
The face huggers and stuff, yeah.
Yeah.
The crabs, the dream crabs.
And the great line about Alien. That's racist.
Yes.
No wonder you keep getting invaded.
Yeah, that's really offensive, yeah. Chris, you had a chance to watch this one, though. What was your impression?
Yeah. The biggest thing for me was I kept getting caught up in the story because I do like it a lot. I don't know if it's this or if it's Christmas Carol as far as like the best Christmas story is concerned, but they're definitely 1 and 2. I just don't know which order I'm going to put them in.
Yeah.
But it's just done so well. Like the lighting is low throughout the whole thing. There's just the way certain things are shot. Like there's a couple sequences, one early, one late, where the dream crabs are starting to like separate from around the heads of the sleepers, as it were, and the way it's shot is you have this close up of the face as the dream crab is coming off, but you can't. It's not long enough or anything to actually see whose face you're meant to be looking at.
Yeah,
which just helps keep the mystery going on and on and on until they realize the whole nested dream stuff. Mm-hmm. So that's I quite enjoyed that. I had in my notes in all caps toy robot cam. 'Cause when just before Santa makes his introduction, there's the slinkies going through, and then there's all these toy robots and whatnot walking down. There's the camera right there, basically on the floor, inches away or zoomed into whatever it is. But like all these toy robots, like all the stuff that really you don't need to do, but it just adds so much flair when you do it.
Yeah. Just for a quick little shot. That's fun. It just sort of gives you, because it gives you the reaction of the characters looking at this toy robot suddenly walking through a hole in the door of this moon base. And it gives you like, they're looking right at it going, what is that? And
North Pole base, but yeah.
Yeah, that's what I meant, yeah.
When there's the one dream crab that Santa gives to the doctor, the specimen, which they think is dead, and then Clara gets sent to go and fetch it, and then it comes back to life because they're thinking about it. The fact that they had the foresight, so I don't know how much of this will be Wilmshurst, how much of it is going to be say Pickwood or whoever, but just the fact they used a slotted table. So that he could actually get a camera underneath the table and have the dream crab kind of skittering along. That worked really well.
Yeah, he loved shooting that scene. That was super creepy. And then you have like the goo sort of dripping through that table as well a bit too. Like it worked for lighting, it worked for being able to see the creature, worked for goo. It's a good director takes either like asks for, hey, make basically a picnic table so that we can have slats in it, or basically takes the table and makes what they can out of it to make such an effective scene. And that scene was super effective. If Clara was like hiding under like a steel filing cabinet or something, it wouldn't have had the same effect. No. As that, and all angles of that looked good.
And neither would it have had the same effect if you went to the other extreme and had even like a glass table.
Yeah,
because you don't have the option for the goo to go through the slats and all that.
And each can see each other, but whereas you could just barely make out that there's a dream crab crawling across this table. Yeah. Otherwise, the scenes in the Dreamland where Clara's with Danny Pink on Christmas morning look really unsettling and unsettlingly festive and bright and happy. Mm-hmm. I was so struck by the Christmas lights in behind everyone, where they're like, it's so out of focus that they're basically just red and blue and yellow like circles in behind, like the lights are so out of focus in those shots.
The fact the story that in the story it's said that when the dream crab is doing its thing, you're anesthetized and everything you're thinking all these happy things, and this kind of goes to the next level for ramping up the set dressing to extol those happy things, like all the lights and the paper snowflakes and the mince tarts on the coffee table, and like everything is just so there. It's just the next level.
Yeah, it was a really great looking thing. It's classic Doctor Who in that it's just this base under siege kind of thing, and they're just not necessarily under siege because they're stuck within the base with the thing. It's not something from the outside trying to get in. They're basically on the inside, not even trying to get out, just sort of trying to deal with what the situation is. It's a very tense and claustrophobic, and I've only seen clips of John Carpenter's The Thing. I have seen the Scenes of Doom though, which is apparently the exact same thing. But I just got that feeling, like I could feel, as you said, Warren, that this is like a 1970s horror film. Just
and that's, I'm sure, deliberate.
Yeah, just being made into a Doctor Who episode. Anything else you had on Last Christmas there, Chris? On your list?
A couple other things. When when the group is holding hands in that circle thing, the camera is almost never static. It's just like all over the place, like close up, wide, panning left and right. Like it's just basically always in constant motion. When the doctor is explaining the whole nested dreams thing, he's like moving his hands and arms, like wildly gesticulating and whatnot. And there's a lot of cutaway shots to the various other actors, but you got Capaldi's hand or arm kind of like, because the focal point is further away. It's kind of like in the forefront, out of focus, but it's kind of obscuring and blocking. And it's the kind of thing that, directing 101 probably tells you to never do. But again,
Right.
It's the kind of thing that gets done and just adds an extra layer of something to it. It helps to break up the mundane nature of just cutting away to cast member X.
Yeah. It keeps everything in frame without having to sort of like you can stay on that static shot or that one camera shot without having to sort of cut away. I do like economy of cameras. Cutaways shouldn't always be necessary. It's nice to have sort of everything contained into one image sometimes.
Yeah. And then the last one I had was toward the end when the doctor was with old Clara. There's some bits where the camera is kind of like bobbing back and forth, left and right, like a boat on water is how I phrased it. Again, it's kind of just something a little bit different. It's not just a static two shot that is so easily done. There's just that a little bit of extra flair.
Yeah, I want to go back and watch this yet again and try to notice if there are different camera movements and like lighting techniques or anything that would sort of differentiate itself from like different levels of the dream of where they're in, like is the reality the only time where it's like sort of like this kind of lighting or camera movements, that sort of thing. I didn't ask him about it. I was wondering maybe I'd be able to spot that. So yet again, I have to go watch that to see if I can determine this.
I was reading something about the production stuff where I guess a plan was to have Shona's hair different lengths depending upon what level of dream or reality you're in.
Oh, interesting.
But that never actually happened.
No. Well, if that was the case, then they'd have to basically retcon all those classic Doctor Who episodes where someone's hair length is vastly different from location to studio recording. So that would have opened up a whole giant kettle of fish.
Sure. Yeah.
So it's a good thing
they would have had to. There's no
They would
choice.
have had
They
to.
have to.
They would have had to have done it. I really like all three of these episodes. It was lovely to revisit the Peter Capaldi era again. I don't know about you two, but I quite enjoy that era. I know that I'm probably bigger on it than Warren is.
Yes, but
Yeah.
I don't hate it or anything. I just like it. It's
Yeah.
less than the Matt Smith era.
Yeah, I was quite enthused by the first two seasons of Capaldi. Not that I was unenthused about the third season, but those first two are near perfection in my eyes. So it was fun to watch those. The usual question we have at these, when the director is still with us, thankfully, is would we want to see them back on the show? And
Not even a question,
I
of course. Yeah.
Paul Wilmshurst to the two. Why haven't you been back? It's been 6 years. Yes, absolutely. I want to see Paul Wilmshurst come back. Yeah. You too, Chris?
Oh yeah. Quite so.
Yeah. Good director. Good episodes.
Doesn't
for
feel
the
like it's
director.
been 6 years.
No, it's a long time, isn't it? Yeah, it's a long time in this world. 6 years ago, but such
well,
as it is.
They shot last Christmas just after returning from, I think it was the Series 8 World Tour, I think it was. So they shot in August, September, something like that.
Yeah. Many a Christmas episode are shot in the heat of summer, as is their way.
As we all remember from the Runaway Bride, Doctor Who Confidential.
Yes.
Shooting
It's
in
a
the
very
middle,
snowy Runaway
shooting in
Bride.
the middle of July when they
Yeah,
have
not
the
a
fake
yeah.
snow.
Yeah, just like there was no fake snow. We just said, fuck. No, it's not going to bother. It's just unseasonably warm at Christmas time in England.
Yeah.
They aren't even going to try it. So.
And the hours of the day are dramatically extended for some strange
For
reason.
some odd reason.
There's
It's
just
fine.
that much more sunlight up that Christmas.
Yep. Anyway, the last thing we usually do on these Miniscope episodes is choose the next subject or victim, depending on who that may be. So, Chris, I assume you have the randomizer open.
Yes, I do.
All right. Begin the spinning of it now. We're getting down there. We're getting down there when it comes to.
I know that for sure.
I know that Carrie Blyton is still sitting there as the only composer on there.
He is the sole composer.
We have
at the moment 21 more names in the randomizer. As we talked about near the outset of the news, Ed Heim, he is coming back for Series 13, will probably be the next person to get added to it once his episode gets made, if it gets made, once we see it, once it goes out.
That's true. Or perhaps there's another director who gets on there. So yeah, very intriguing. All right.
Probably won't be Farron Blackburn, who did Rings of Akadan, though.
Probably not. Okay. Stop.
Stephen Thompson.
How can we talk about a person who doesn't exist except in the fevered brain of Stephen Moffat when his scripts fall through? This is fascinating.
Yes.
So,
for those who may not be aware, Stephen's theory is that Stephen Thompson is Stephen Moffat as a pen name.
Yeah.
When he doesn't want his names associated with scripts like
the Curse of the Black Spot,
for example,
and Journey to the Center of the TARDIS. And what's the third one he wrote?
Oh man,
I've even forgotten.
I'm going to cheat and look it up.
Do it, because I can't remember.
Because I know he did.
My God,
Attack of the Cybermen, I believe.
I know he did the one Sherlock as well, or a couple Sherlocks.
Oh yeah. Apparently he did one of those, and nothing since. Riddle me that.
Time Heist.
Oh, that was a good one. I like Time Heist.
Yeah, exactly.
Co-wrote co-writer credit with Stephen Moffat on that one. So, yeah, Curse of the Black Spot and Journey to the Center of the TARDIS from the Matt Smith era, and Time Heist. Sticking with some Series 8 like we did this week.
Well, Stephen, folks, listen, I hope you're doing okay during all this COVID-19 pandemic nonsense, but what other podcast would say, you know what, now is the time to do a deep dive on the writing,
fake guy.
On the writing career. My fingers have just sprained because of my air quotes so much during this, of writer Steve and Thompson on the next Miniscope, whenever that may be.
He did 3 Sherlocks, okay.
Well, sure. He did 3 Sherlocks. Sure. That's exactly what he did. Well, that'll be on the next Miniscope, whenever that may be. Here's what's happening starting next week, folks. Patreon supporters have already got these in their special feed, but now it's time to release these to the world. Over the next 6 weeks, we'll present to you our epic commentary series recorded in one sitting of Frontier in Space and Planet of the Daleks. Over the next 6 weeks, with 2 episodes of Doctor Who per week. Friends such as Kyle Anderson and Liz Miles and Toby Haydock and Paul Cornell will be joining for these commentaries. This is a way to sort of say, hey, let's just take a break, sit down, watch 2 episodes of Doctor Who a week, and then we'll see where we all are in 6 weeks' time. In the world and where society is, hopefully, it'll be a good way,
and where we can slot in Steve Thompson.
It'll happen after that. It'll take us a lot of time to summon up the courage to talk about Stephen Thompson. So that'll happen after these commentaries will go out.
We'll have to receive probably some sort of like sedative drug treatment thing to watch Curse of the Black Spot.
This is gonna be.
I call that
fun.
a hammer, right to the skull.
Yeah, it's gonna be fun, folks. Could be a lot of fun. So yes, commentaries starting next week. Join us for those, will you please? Watch along some Doctor Who with us. It'll be fun. We'll have some fun. We'll take our mind off things for an hour or so a week, and then we'll see where we are as we get back. And then the next Miniscope will be Stephen Thompson, for crying out loud. So all right. So until next week, everyone. I'm Stephen in Edmonton.
Warren in Vancouver.
And Chris in Edmonton.
So long for now.
You've been listening to Radio Free Skaro. Find us online at radiofreeskaro.com. Follow us on Twitter and Tumblr at Radio Free Skaro. Subscribe to us on iTunes and donate to the show at patreon.com/Radio Free Skaro. Thank you.